Coming from the farthest reaches of the universe to challenge the worst toy repairs on Earth is the most powerful hero ever, Toy Polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from Toy Polloi, and in today's video we're going to be looking at repairing and restoring a vintage Thundercats Thunder Tank. Now, for quite a long time I've had the remains of this Thunder Tank out in my garage, and every time I look at it I think, at some point I should really get round to fixing that up, and I've been slowly collecting pieces for it, and recently I thought I'd got all the pieces that I needed to get this restored, so I went and dug it out, had a quick look at it and realised actually it's in a much worse state than I'd remembered, and there was quite a lot of damage to the wheels and even more pieces missing than I had remembered. So what have I done? Well, I've gone and bought myself another one. So I went onto eBay and I found the remains of another Thunder Tank, which has quite a lot of pieces missing, quite a lot of damage to it, but I think between these two Thunder Tanks I should be able to make something that looks pretty reasonable, even if it is in a wabby-sabby way. So that's the project for today. We are going to be restoring and repairing a vintage Thundercats Thunder Tank. Okay, so what have we got to do? Well, as I say, this is the Thunder Tank that I had out in my garage, and it was missing a few pieces, mainly these sort of rear sort of canopy sections, but I've now managed to find all of those, even though they are all broken, all of the clips are broken. I thought that would actually be something that would be fairly straightforward to repair, but when I came to look at the rest of this Thunder Tank I realised that it had some serious damage to the back section of the tracks. It's actually missing one whole chunk there, and I think someone might have been using this Thunder Tank for parts anyway in the past, because there are lots of other pieces missing. You can see we've got a couple of the other tank track pieces missing on the side, and if we turn it around it's the same. We've got more tank track pieces missing, and the rear section of this was broken. So although a lot of this looks pretty reasonable, there's enough missing that I knew I would have to buy myself another one. So yeah, I went onto eBay and I found this, which as you can see looks fairly rough, but it does have all the pieces that I think I need to repair this one. It came with a couple of tracks. One of them is broken. As you can see, this has started to perish quite badly. The other track is in fairly reasonable condition, although I haven't actually tried to remove it. It also comes with the rear canopy sections, again in a fairly sorry state. This one's incredibly yellowed and broken. These two are actually not too bad condition, but it does have all of these tracks intact, so that's the pieces that I need off this one. But as you can see, there's also some serious yellowing going on. So what we're going to do is take the best from this one and the best from this one and combine them together, and then do a whole load of other repairs, because we've got to repair all of the clips and sort of hinges on these pieces and just generally get this thing looking pretty nice. So that is the goal for today's project. Even looking at this now, I can see there is more damage than I've sort of noticed. This front claw here, there's a big crack going around there which goes all the way down there, so I think we're going to have to replace that as well. It's going to be quite an interesting project. I've never worked on these before. They are all new to me, so everything that I do today is a sort of a new learning process. I can even see actually that the feet on this one, that one touches the floor, whereas these ones don't. I wonder if there's something going on with that mechanism as well. So it's all a learning curve to me. The first thing we've got to do though is actually start taking these apart and then give everything a good clean, because they are both filthy. So let's start removing screws and see what happens.
C-O-Y-D-E-S-C-R-O-I. That is incorrect. Try again.
Right, so although this is the more battered looking one, this is the one I'm going to use as the base because the colour of it is a lot better. The other one has quite a lot of yellowing all over, whereas this one is still pretty grey. So this is the one that we will try and take most pieces from. First thing to do is actually to remove this unbroken canopy piece, and you can see that it clips into these two holes here. I'm hoping just with a little bit of twisting we can get that out. I can see on the other side that the clip is broken, so they're obviously fairly fragile, but yeah, okay, that one is out and this one has an unbroken hinge. Now we need to sort out getting this apart. It looks like there's a lot of screws. We've got screws on the sides here, we've got screws on the bottom, there's two there, and then I'm guessing there's more on the back. So let me get the correct screwdriver and we'll just see what happens. As you can see, I've already got quite a lot of this apart, and as I'm going along, I'm learning an awful lot about the toy. It's actually been quite tricky to get apart just because a lot of the screws have sort of stuck, and so they're not freeing up particularly easy. In fact, on this side here, I've had to drill out one of the screws because I just could not get this rear section off. But that's not a problem because obviously we have a donor and I can replace those screws. But actually, now that I've got this far into it, I've realized there's some bits that I didn't need to take apart. I didn't need to take this rear section off because I can actually clean all of that with that piece still intact. And as I've come around to the side, I can see there's some sort of serious internal damage. Where this screw is attached here, you can see it has snapped off, and I've actually got that piece there, so that piece needs to be reattached. But if we turn this over and look on the other side, it's obviously broken previously, and someone has actually made a repair to this. So you can see that one has been glued on, and there's lots of glue residue around, so it looks like they've glued a fair amount of it. So this toy has had some previous repairs done to it, which actually means I think I may not bother using the bulk of this. I was hoping to use the bulk of this, but I think I'm going to change my plan and swap over to the other one. The other one is a bit yellowed, obviously has the yellow front here. So what I'm going to do now is actually take off the bits that I need that aren't yellowed on this one. I think we can take off this front section here. There are 4 screws underneath. And then I'm going to start work on the other one, and I don't think actually I'm going to have to take that much of that one apart because it's only a few pieces to replace. But as I say, that's what happens when you sort of start sort of fixing up a toy. You never know what you're going to find, and this one is just a bit more damaged than I'd expected. So yeah, it's going to be good for parts, and it's certainly been a good learning curve about what I need to do and what breaks on this toy. But yeah, I think in the end this is not going to be the one that I'm going to fix up. It's actually the other one that, although looks worse, will end up looking better. So let's take a few more pieces of this. I'm going to take off this front section here, and I think that's possibly the last piece, and then we'll start working on the other one and seeing what we can swap out on that. But yeah, it's interesting, very interesting. So here is the other one, and yeah, as you can see, it's actually, once you take everything off it, it's not in too bad condition. The worst bit is this front yellowed piece, but as you see, I've already removed the other one, so we can swap that out. I think I will try and take quite a lot of this apart because some of the pieces are a bit yellowed, and it would be quite nice to swap out as much as I can. So I am going to go for it on this one, just try and take everything apart again. But now that I've learned what to do and which bits I need to remove, yeah, it's not going to be so bad. So let's get this one stripped down as well. The fun part really is going to be rebuilding all of this and trying to remember where everything goes. But I'm certainly, as I say, learning a lot as I take this apart. And yeah, it's a very interesting toy. Quite over-engineered, really. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of screws. I don't think you'd get a toy made like this today. So it's yeah, it's certainly a well-built thing. I think I am pretty much done taking this apart. There are more areas that I could sort of remove, but as I've said with the sort of toy restorations before, sometimes it's best just to leave bits together. There's no point in taking everything apart if you don't need to. And I think on this one, I've got to the limit of what I need to do. I really need to clean inside it, so I've taken the top front section off, so you can see there's loads of dust in there. And then looking at the back, you can see there was absolutely loads of dust in there, and I was thinking I'd have to take the whole of it apart, but actually just taking this bottom panel off, which allows you to gain access to the lower jaw, means that I can now actually get inside there and clean quite easily, because this sort of rear gunner section is now loose and you can actually move it about quite freely. So yeah, I don't have to take the rest of it apart to be able to clean inside. And when I come to put this all back together, I'm going to start swapping out some of the rusty screws anyway, so if they get a little bit wet while I'm washing and cleaning it, I'm not too worried. The main sort of body of this is actually in pretty reasonable condition. It's a little bit yellowed, but not enough for me to worry about, and I'm certainly not going to bother de-yellowing it. And there are a few little sort of cracks and marks, especially on this rear section. You can see here where I've removed the that blue section, that some of the plastic has some sort of stress marks to it, but it isn't broken, it isn't cracked, it's just a little bit stressed, so it's not enough to worry about. So what we're going to do now is actually give everything a good clean. I'm going to not bother cleaning the parts that I'm not going to be using, so things like that, which is very yellowed, I'm not going to bother cleaning, and the broken rear track sections that I took off the first one, there's no point in cleaning those because, yeah, I'm not going to be using them. I might take some of the screws off because some of the screws on the other one that I have are a little bit on the rusty side, and I might as well just swap those screws over. So it's just going to be a case of some hot soapy water and a toothbrush and an awful lot of scrubbing until I've got this as clean as I can get it, and then we can start rebuilding it before repairing all of the other pieces. Now that everything is clean, we can actually start putting this back together. So you can see this is the sort of main body section of the Thunder Tank, and I'm going to be taking the best bits out of those two to make one pretty reasonable looking one. And I've got a box next to me with all of those clean pieces in. So let's start the sort of rebuilding process. The first thing we want to do is actually put this front canopy part back on, and that really just does sit on there. And then if we turn it over, there are 4 screw holes, and we have to put 4 screws back in. Again, I'm going to be taking the best screws out of the lot because some of them were pretty rusty. So we've got to put 4 screws in there. And there were 2 types of screw on the Thunder Tank. We've got some short ones and we've got some longer ones. We will be using the longer ones for this section. So let's get this top section screwed on, then we can deal with the jaw and this sort of underside plate. Now we come on to the lower jaw section, and this was held on with a little spring, and the spring actually attaches to this mechanism here, which is all part of the sort of rear gunner chair mechanism. And you can see there is a hook on one side, and we have to hook this spring onto that, and then we can pull everything forward, and we'll attach this lower panel which just clips in place at one end, and then there are 2 screws at the other end, and again this is the longer screws. So I'm just going to get this hooked on, and then we can sort of try and pull everything into place. This is going to be a bit awkward because it's all slightly sprung loaded, and dealing with springs can be a bit fiddly, so let's just try our best and get this attached. Now that we have that spring hooked on, we can put the rest of this mechanism back together. So there's a crossbar here on this grey piece, and that fits into 2 little notches on either side of the inside. So we have to just sort of push that down into the right place. And then we have the same on the jaw. We have a crossbar and again 2 little notches that we can line that up into like that. Make sure we hold everything in place. And then we get this lower panel which has 2 screw holes on one end, and we have to line those up with the screw holes there, and the other end just sort of clips under, and it's a little bit sort of harder to put this piece in because you have to sort of wiggle it a bit to make sure it lines up with all of the sort of internal mechanisms. You can see there are 2 sort of hinges on either side, and then we have these posts inside, so we have to make sure that those sort of push in the right position. So it's a bit awkward to do. Everything is spring loaded, so it is sort of trying to push its way out. So I just hold everything down and I push this in, hopefully it will all line up. There we go, like that. And again, I've just got 2 screws to put in there, which are the longer black screws. The rear mechanism on the Thunder Tank is what holds the seat locked down and also the rest of the vehicle sort of locked together, and it has 2 main components, which are these bars that need to be slotted in through the holes on the back, and you have a left and a right of these. If you look at them, you can see we've got this sort of little spring piece at the back, and then there is a sort of bend halfway down. So both of these bars have to go in this way round, with the bend sort of pointing towards the inner part of the vehicle. But they're a little bit fiddly to get in. You have to sort of push them through the hole in a little bit of a twist like that, and then inside you will also see there is a hole just down there at the bottom, and you have to line that up and push it into that little place like that, and it will then sort of just slide in quite nicely. So we have to do the same on this side. We just twist that around a bit and then line it up with the hole, push it in, make sure the other one hasn't fallen out in the meantime, like so. And then we have the rest of the rear mechanism to put together, and that consists of this piece here, which is a sort of the button piece, and that has to go underneath these two clips. So you can see on the clips we have these little bars that are sticking out, and you have to sort of pull these out so that they are resting on the blue section. We also have a spring that needs to go in place, and that has to be pushed onto that little sort of post there. So we can push that on and make sure everything is still sort of in place. And then we can get the rear section, which is this larger piece with the sort of the exhausts on it, and that gets put over the top. You have to sort of make sure everything is held in the correct position as you do that, like so. And then you can see this button does actually push up and down on the spring, and hopefully if everything is in position when you do that, the grey bars will move just a bit when you push it down to the furthest extent, which it is. And now we can screw that all into place, and there are 4 screws on this one. We need 2 of the longer ones and 2 of the shorter ones. The shorter ones go on these bottom holes and the longer ones go on the top hole. So let's get this screwed back in place, and then we can check the mechanism actually works. So we can now test this mechanism. So let's lock this seat down into the sort of hidden position. You'll see those bars at the bottom move to the right once we do this. They should move and click, which they do. And the wheels at the front have now hidden away as well, and the jaw has closed. And now if I press that button on the back, all of that should unlock. The wheels will drop down, the jaw will open, and that seat will ping up, which it has. So that's all working. So now we can go ahead and start reattaching the tracks and the front claws. Now we are going to reattach these front arms and guns, and I can see that on the 2 that I had, one of them had actually been taken apart and put together wrong, because now I've got it apart I can see exactly what's going on. On the back of the arm there is this little post, and if you look inside into the mechanism, we've got the gun locked down at the moment. There is a little post there, and the tab on the back of the arm needs to go underneath that. If you put it on top of it, the arm will be much lower down, but when the mechanism is fired, this arm won't move. If you put the little tab underneath that post there, when the mechanism is fired, that part moves downwards and it will raise both of the claws up. So you have to sort of carefully push this in and make sure it hooks underneath that, and you can then see the top line of the vehicle sort of follows on down the front of the claw. So that's how that needs to be lined up. We then get the gun piece, which again just sort of slots in there. This is the gun and wheel. And then we need one of these grey pieces, and again this needs to be slotted in the right way round. I haven't actually sort of worked out how that needs to go at the moment, but I'm assuming it'll be fairly obvious. It will only go in one way. So you can see we've got 2 screw holes, and the screw holes are slightly off-centered, so yeah, we need to put it in that way round. Just push that in. I'm assuming it will just sort of click in place if it's lined up properly, which that does feel like it is. And then we need to put 2 of the longer screws in here, and then we'll do exactly the same on the other side. So let's get this arm screwed on and see if the mechanism works. So that's both sides screwed on, and if I press the button on the back, what should happen now is both of these front arms should raise up, as well as the gunner's chair and also the jaw opening, and everything should sort of look like it should have done originally. So let's give that a press. I'm going to press the button on the back. Yeah, and there we go. That is working. All of the front section is now raising up. The gun has moved. Yeah, that's pretty good. So let's put the rear tracks back on. Attaching the rear tracks looks fairly straightforward. Here is one of the unbroken rear tracks from my donor vehicle. You can see there's a metal post here which needs to go into this little slot here, and there's a wide point on the slot, so we just have to sort of jiggle it about until that goes in like that. Then we can line up this top section onto that sort of rear mounting. We then have this little black sort of runner which needs to go over this part here, which is the same as the sort of bit on the front, but just in a blue plastic. So we have to stick that over there. And then we've got to line up these screw holes with the sort of markers on the main body, which I think is going to be fairly straightforward as well. Yeah, that feels like that's lined up. And then we put in 2 of the longer screws, and then we do exactly the same on the other side. So let me get these 2 bits screwed on, and then we can see what the vehicle looks like. And after all of that work, we now have the sort of bare bones of a Thunder Tank that is all in good condition and all working again. So we've taken the remains of 2 busted Thunder Tanks and made this, but we are missing some key pieces. I do have all of the panels, but they need repairing, so we are going to be working on that next. But before we do that, I thought it'd be quite nice to actually get this looking like the Thunder Tank. So we're missing the tracks at the back. One of my donor tanks did actually come with some tracks, but they were in pretty rough condition. The rubber on those has really started to perish, and although I could get them sort of looking half decent, I thought the best way to go was actually to buy some replacements, and that's what I've done. So here we have 2 lovely replacement tank tracks for the Thunder Tank, and if you want to get some of these yourself, then head over to Sloth and Crocodile on Etsy. They make replacement tyres for all sorts of things like Transformers and GoBots, but they've just started doing these, which are the Thunder Tank tracks. So that's where I've got them from. I will put a link to their Etsy page in the description as well. Let's get these fitted on the Thunder Tank and see what it looks like, and then we can start repairing all of the panels on the back. Now we come on to the rear of the Thunder Tank, which is where most people seem to have issues, and that's these 3 covers here that hide all of the internal bits. When you press this button on the back, everything flips open and the gun flips out, and I think that is the reason that a lot of this gets broken. There are some very weak hinges on either side here and also on the back, and on the one I have here I've only got one of these panels without a broken hinge on it. So let's just fire this open and I'll show you what happens. Yeah, that's pretty much what happens. This panel here, you can see, still has the hinges intact, but all of the others have bits of them missing. You can see that's what the hinge part should look like, and that is often what they do look like, snapped off, and then the rear panel is pretty much the same. This one is not quite so damaged, but it's still missing a key part. So we are going to have to replace those, and I think the way to do that is going to be just to remodel something out of some styrene sheet. This plastic is very good with plastic weld, and if it's good with plastic weld, it means that you can just get some styrene sheet and sort of attach it on, and we should be able to recreate these pieces just using some 2mm thick styrene sheet and a bit of careful cutting. So let's see what we can make and see if we can actually repair those. Right, so we are going to start with this rear panel because I think it's going to be the easiest of the 2 to recreate. You can see the bit that is missing is a fairly simple shape. It's just a post with a little pip on the end, and I think we can make that out of some 2mm thick styrene sheet, maybe with an extra bit of 0.5mm styrene sheet. I've measured the original thickness of this and it is actually 2.5mm thick, so as I've only got 2mm thick styrene sheet, that's what the 0.5mm is going to be for. I'm going to stick these 2 pieces together to make it the right thickness, and I'm really just going to sort of crudely shape something just using these tools here. So I've got a knife, I've got some plastic nippers, got a few little files, and just really just going to do it by eye, and I'm going to be using plastic weld to hold everything together. Plastic weld is not a glue, it's a solvent, and it actually dissolves the plastic and you end up with a bond that should be as strong as the original. And to make the little pip, I probably could do that just using the 2mm thick styrene sheet and cutting a little piece and sort of sanding it to shape, but it turns out I have some 4mm diameter rod, and it looks like that is pretty similar in size to the little pip that was there. These are all offcuts. Whenever I do a project, I stick all of the offcuts of styrene sheet that I get in a bag, and I always come back to this. Rather than using new styrene, I will just go into this bag and see what I've got, and it's always useful pieces in there. So this is just going to be made out of the scraps from other projects. So yeah, let's get cutting. I think the first thing we need to do is that brake is really quite uneven. You can see it's at a bit of an angle, so I'm going to file that down until we've got a nice flat surface, and then we can work off of that and start sticking pieces on and start shaping. And I wouldn't have thought it would take particularly long to get something that actually looks pretty reasonable. Then we'll let everything set and give it a test. So yeah, let's get filing, sanding and cutting. And here's what I was able to make. As you can see, it's a pretty good representation of the original hinge. I did actually insert a tiny piece of paper clip just to add some extra support. The plastic weld has worked, and it really has sort of attached it very firmly, but because this needs a little bit of a spring to it when you insert it into the toy, I thought adding a bit of paper clip just for that extra bit of support was worthwhile. So all I've done is drilled a very small hole through the two pieces and then pushed a piece of paper clip in. I've not even glued that in place, and that's just added that extra little bit of sort of firmness to the side of that. So let's try this on the toy. So to fit it in, I'm going to put the newly made one in first. We just slot that in, and then we'll bend the other one slightly. That should clip in place. Yeah, that is working. That's really not too bad at all. I'm very happy with that, and you can just about see there's a little bit of white plastic showing, so I will give this a coat of paint once I'm all done. But I'm pretty happy with that. In fact, if anything, it's a little bit loose. The original side doesn't seem to want to fit. Maybe that has slightly bent out of place. I might just reposition that. If I put this into some just boiled water, I might be able to just sort of give that a little bit of a bend out. The plastic does feel fairly brittle, so I have to go pretty slow with it, but I might give that a try just before I finish working on this. But otherwise, that is fitting and is working pretty well. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Now we can get on and do exactly the same on this one. This one is only 2mm thick, so I don't need to do the extra bit of styrene sheet. So I'm just going to make it in exactly the same way, a bit of 2mm styrene plastic and then a little pip on the side to finish the hinge. So let's get this second one made. And there we go, that's the second clip made. So now we can test this in the Thunder Tank. And what you need to do for getting these side panels on is actually take out the screw that's on the side. There's a small screw there, and that means that you can slightly pull this panel away. And so when you put it in, you don't put any pressure on these little clips, which are obviously a bit on the fragile side. So we can put one side in like that. If I just line that up, and then you'll see I can get a screwdriver here and I can open the side panel and then just drop in the other part of the clip, and then we'll let go, and if it all fits we can add the screw back there. But you can see that is now working again. So I've got all of those panels in place. But before I do actually sort of finish this off, I want to repaint those little pieces that I've made, because although they're white and you can't see them, they are there, and I think just a little bit of grey paint on them will hide the sort of the newly made pieces, and it's going to be very simple to do. So I'm going to get out some acrylic paints, mix up a bit of grey and just get those touched up, and I think, yeah, everything is good. It's all working again. And so here we go. Here is the finished Thunder Tank, and I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. It's been quite a lot of work, but a very interesting project because, as I said at the start, it's not a toy that I'd ever worked on before. So taking it apart and learning how the things go together and how all of the mechanisms work is always a very interesting part of restoring any toy for me. And at the end, I've got a really nice looking Thunder Tank, and everything now works on it. We've got all of the back panels repaired and all of those hinges work. We've got some replacement tyre tracks, and I've swapped out all of the broken parts and got everything working again. And I've now got a very nice Thunder Tank to put on display. And as I said, everything works on it. So if I quickly turn this around and press the button on the back, the whole of the mechanism should work. Everything should fire up. The claws should come out the front. The jaw will open. All of these back panels will open, and we'll have the gunner chair pop up. So let me press the button and we'll see what happens. There we go. It does jump up. We can then put old Panthro in the back there, in the gunner station, and get him ready to do some fighting. It really is a cool toy. There's lots going on with it and lots of little pieces, but I do think it could have more done to it, and I will be returning to this in future because the Thunder Tank has absolutely no stickers on it. It's got a little bit of detailing on the top, but otherwise it really is a very bare looking vehicle, and there are loads of places on it that we could add stickers. We've got this whole console section at the front that could have stickers added to it. We've got loads inside. There's all of these sort of flat surfaces where you could add some details just using a few stickers, and then there's the back of it as well, and just generally all over the Thunder Tank there are lots of blank spaces. So I want to make myself a set of custom stickers to really bring this vehicle to life. So I will be returning to the Thunder Tank in future. But for now, this is it for this project. It's been a fun thing to work on. I do need to say a massive thank you to Elliot, who very kindly sent me the bare bones of a Thunder Tank a long time ago, and it's been sitting out in my garage waiting to be fixed. So thanks to him for sending that over. If you want to get the replacement tank tracks, as I say, that's from Sloth and Crocodile on Etsy. I will put a link to that in the description. And if you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help support Toy Polloi, then why not think about becoming a Patreon or YouTube channel member? You get early access to all of my restoration videos and access to an exclusive series called On the Cutting Mat, where I show restorations and projects that you won't see anywhere else. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.